Welcome to Lancashire Footnotes. And you. Welcome to Lancashire Footnotes.
Today we're in Lytham, and at the moment we're in Witch Wood.
Maggie Thatcher, God rest her shrivelled soul, once remarked that
if only every town in Britain could be more like Lytham.
we're not entirely sure what she meant by that.
Les Dawson took a less enigmatic approach when he wrote that.
Lytham is almost perfect. All that's missing is a suicide booth.
People like Lytham.
They think it's old and posh.
It was recorded in the Domesday Book as Lindum, meaning the town in the hills, apparently.
This is where the end of the pier acts come to die.
Look closely at the blue plaques, however, and you'll find that most of the public buildings are registered charities.
There's something incongruous about that, in a town renowned for being so opulent.
On the other hand, there's always something a bit grungy about the place.
To quote from Peter Whittle's Marina, published in 1799,
the people here bathe not at all, whilst those at a distance think it a blessing.
Holmes the barber said he had never bathed in his life, nor could I persuade him to do so.
Originally, the town had a thriving shrimping industry,
But later became a health resort, popular with wealthy Lancastrian industrialists hoping to chamfer a bit off their industrial-sized waistlines.
Its two most famous buildings are, appropriately named, Lytham Hall
And the equally appropriately named Lytham Windmill.
Lytham Hall went up in 1606 under the supervision of Cuthbert Clifton.
Over the remains of a Benedictine priory.
Bits of the priory can still be found, scattered around the grounds.
In 1757, Thomas Clifton started work on the current hall,
Lancashire's own Downton Abbey, as it's been called.
although by whom we've forgotten. At some point or other, the road that originally ran past the front door was moved, because the owner didn't want peasants passing by his window.
With that sort of pedigree, you'd expect a couple of ghosts to be hanging around.
And as always, with Lancashire buildings in need of a bit of self-promotion, you wouldn't be disappointed.
A white lady frequently startles visitors in the long gallery, apparently.
Nobody knows who she was.
Others report footsteps and clanking chains, together with the ghost of Sir Cuthbert himself in the upper bedrooms.
We don't know what he's up to either. Everybody needs a hobby, and you know what aristocrats are like.
They were a rich and powerful lot, the Cliftons.
Titled, landed, and mostly MPs, some before Parliament was even invented.
You have to be opulent to have the main street named after you.
Clifton Street even has its own weend.
In the summer, it resembles a miniature version of the Grand Bazaar.
The Clifton line ended in the 20th century with Henry de Vere Clifton, who'd squandered the family fortune on, well, rubbish, mainly.
Henry didn't care.
He poured vast amounts of inherited capital into investments with all the business acumen of a Barings banker, until he was flat broke.
By the end, Henry had successfully frittered away over £4 million.
That's quite an accomplishment when you consider that most people would be able to live on the interest alone.
The Clifton coat of arms remains above the gates,
The family motto lives on as well.
even if the family doesn't.
Mortem o triumphum, it boldly declares.
Death! Or victory.
In Henry's case, he settled for the former.
Onwards to Lytham Windmill.
The only windmill in existence, with a lifeboat house attached to it.
Back in the day, its sails almost reached down to the apron.
A bit like Windy Miller's sails in Camberwick Green.
In 1909, a Manchester schoolboy thought it'd be fun to grab one of them as it swept past.
The sails reached their zenith, where he lost his grip and fell to his death. Not a humorous story, I must admit. The lifeboat house was built, for the most part, from cobbles. There's been a lifeboat at Lytham since 1851.
It isn't operational nowadays.
It was closed in 1931 when the Lifeboat was upgraded to a more contemporary model, which unfortunately wouldn't fit inside the building.
It's now a museum.
Getting back to the mill, in 1919 a severe gale caused the sails to rotate so fast that the entire building caught fire.
Burning debris was hurled 50 yards down the green.
Since then the windmill's been renovated, of course.
Two curiosities worth a mention before we leave.
The first is Witch Wood, nowadays a site of special scientific interest.
Protecting our indigenous trees from invasive foreigners.
Which possibly sums up the Lytham residents better than any political accusations ever could.
More intriguing, however, is the grave at its heart.
The epitaph on which reads,
The witch died January 5th, 1888.
Round about this point you might be expecting tales of salacious lasses dancing at midnight in their scuddies.
Unfortunately, the truth's rather disappointing.
The witch was actually a horse that was fatally injured in a fall.
Witchwood is littered with the Clifton's family pets.
Our second curio is Lytham's own Nosferatu.
In 2005, the owner of a local French restaurant was chatting with a male customer.
When said customer suddenly sank his teeth into her neck.
Another woman suffered a similar fate later in the pub.
La Fang, as our enthusiastic vampire became known, unsurprisingly hit the headlines.
He was described as
well-dressed, 5 feet 8 inches tall, with dark hair.
As far as we know, he's still at large.
Possibly hanging upside down in St. Cuthbert's belfry.
One last oddity before we wrap this minisode up. The Beast of Lytham.
There have been sightings of this creature going back decades, although no two descriptions match.
Sometimes it's the size of a fox.
Other times, a small cow.
Often it's shaped like a Labrador.
Sometimes a goat with long matted ears.
It watches people from bushes.
Or creeps up behind them when they're playing bowls and snarls.
That's enough about Lytham for now.
If you've enjoyed this minisode,
and let's be honest, who wouldn't?
Then please click like.
Subscribe, if you haven't already.
And leave us a comment.
And don't forget to tune in for the next Lancashire Footnotes,
where we'll be somewhere different.